People suffering under persecution. And these images, these vivid images that it paints, are aimed at encouraging them to have hope in the promise of God. You see, promise and hope is what the whole scriptural story is all about. It starts with the promise of creation that we heard as we listened to the creation story, and it ends with the great promise at the end of Revelation 21. And in between those covers, in between those books at the beginning and the end of the biblical story, we find promise and promise and promise, and people living in hope in the light of that promise. When we enter into times of trouble, we need promise, and we need promise from someone we can truly trust. I experienced this in my own life many years ago. I can take you back to South Africa at the time as a young man. I had been overseas from my country doing mission work, and had returned to teach at the university. And suddenly things seemed very dark. We were living in an era of apartheid, of the oppression of black people, of a government system that seemed that it would never change. And slowly, friend after friend of mine were arrested and taken into prison. Other friends' passports were taken away. And a friend of mine called me, worked at Siemens, the big technological company, they didn't actually call me, came to speak to me and told me my telephone was tapped and that I should be careful what I say on the phone. And then one morning, I stepped into my office, which I left locked. And the door was locked as I came into the office that morning. As I opened the door, all the books in my office were piled in the middle of the room on the floor in a big pile, which reminded me a little bit of those pictures that we see from the Second World War, from the era of Hitler, where they had a Kristallnacht, where they threw all the books in a pile and then burned them. I looked at my office that was in shambles, and I had lost hope. I thought this was never going to change. Nothing will ever be different in this place. And then a colleague came in the door and said absolutely nothing. But he simply picked up a book and put it back on the shelf. And I picked up a book and I put it back on the shelf. And together, without words, we filled the shelves carefully and systematically. And as we did this, hope started to well up in me, because as our shoulders rubbed together in repairing the damage, I realized that in His presence and in His faith with me, I can have faith in God. Promise and hope. I wonder if you've ever faced a scary situation where it seemed that there was no hope. Have you ever felt that God is never going to come through for me? I hear all these promises, but I'm not sure if there truly is reason to hope under these circumstances. Let me invite you to think about this in the light of the biblical story. The great promise of God for all creation. I see a new heaven. I see a new earth. And God has come to live with God's people. Let's leave aside all the things that may stop us, and let us defy some of those things that are making us feel hopeless and helpless in our circumstances. Let us set aside those petty things that bother us about church and about other people around us, those petty things that may keep us from feeling that God's hope is even in the life of the church, despite what we see around us. And let us start, pick up the books, pick up the pieces of life, pick up the pieces of destruction, pick up the pieces of this creation that is being destroyed, pick up the pieces of faith. Because if we do that, like my friend's shoulder rubbed against me that morning many years ago, we will find in God's presence, in the presence of those with us, the promises of God as contained in the Scripture. Jewish rabbis have often spoken about a very powerful thought. They call it the tikkun olam, the repair of the world. The job of the which is upon all our lives. And we share this history with them as Christians. We are called to the task of world repair. That repair includes our relationships with one another. It includes our relationships with creation. And of course, it includes our relationship with God. We are living in brokenness. And often our hope is very, very faint. But when we take up the task, and when we defy our hopelessness, we will discover again the power of this promise that God gives to us as individuals and to God's church in the world. I see a new heaven and a new earth. The old has passed away. The new has come. God is dwelling with God's people. Right where you are right now, whether here in church or watching on television, whether you're in a nursing home or whether you're driving your own car around the place, you can take up this task. You can have